The book of Jeremiah is one of the major prophetic books in the Old Testament, written by the prophet Jeremiah, who ministered during the turbulent final years of Judah, leading up to and following the Babylonian exile, 7th to 6th century BCE. Known as the Weeping Prophet, Jeremiah delivers messages of judgment, repentance, and restoration, often facing personal suffering for his faithfulness to God's call. Jeremiah's call and commission. Jeremiah's call. God calls Jeremiah as a prophet before his birth, commissioning him to speak to nations about uprooting and building, symbolizing judgment and restoration. Reluctance and assurance. Jeremiah expresses hesitation, citing his youth, but God assures him of his protection and guidance. Warnings of judgment against Judah. Condemnation of idolatry and sin. Jeremiah denounces Judah's unfaithfulness, comparing it to spiritual adultery, and warns of the consequences of their idolatry, social injustice, and false worship. Broken covenant. The people's violation of the covenant with God is a recurring theme, symbolized by Jeremiah smashing a pot to demonstrate Judah's impending destruction. Conflict with false prophets. Jeremiah confronts prophets who offer false assurances of peace, particularly Hananiah, who opposes Jeremiah's message of Babylonian dominance. Symbolic acts. Jeremiah performs symbolic actions to illustrate his prophecies, such as wearing a yoke to signify submission to Babylon. Prophecies of the Babylonian exile. Warning of exile. Jeremiah predicts the fall of Jerusalem and the Babylonian captivity as punishment for Judah's sins. Letter to the exiles. Jeremiah writes to the exiles in Babylon, encouraging them to settle, seek the prosperity of their new home, and trust in God's plan for their eventual return. The promise of restoration. Book of consolation. This section contains some of Jeremiah's most hopeful messages, emphasizing God's plans to restore Israel and Judah after their punishment. The New Covenant. Jeremiah foretells a new covenant where God's law will be written on the hearts of his people, promising a deeper, transformative relationship. Davidic Messiah. Jeremiah prophesies the coming of a righteous branch from David's line, who will reign justly. The fall of Jerusalem. Siege and destruction. Jeremiah witnesses the Babylonian siege and destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BCE, fulfilling his earlier prophecies. Imprisonment and rescue. Jeremiah is persecuted, imprisoned, and nearly killed for his prophecies, but is ultimately spared by the Babylonians after Jerusalem falls. Events after the fall. Life among the remnant. Jeremiah remains in Judah with the poor remnant left by the Babylonians, but continues to warn against rebellion and fleeing to Egypt. Flight to Egypt. Against his warnings, the remnant flees to Egypt, where Jeremiah predicts further judgment. Oracles against the nations. Jeremiah delivers prophecies against various nations, including Babylon, highlighting God's sovereignty over all peoples. Fall of Babylon. The book concludes with a prophecy of Babylon's eventual destruction, emphasizing God's justice. Themes. Judgment and repentance. Jeremiah emphasizes the need for repentance to avoid judgment, illustrating the consequences of persistent sin. Faithfulness and suffering. Jeremiah serves as a model of perseverance, remaining obedient to God despite rejection, persecution, and personal anguish. The New Covenant. A key theological theme is the promise of a new, inward covenant between God and his people, pointing to future redemption. God's sovereignty. Jeremiah highlights God's control over nations and history, using Babylon as an instrument of his judgment. Hope and restoration. Despite harsh messages of judgment, the book also offers profound hope for restoration, both spiritual and national. The book of Jeremiah is a powerful exploration of God's justice and mercy, emphasizing the need for a sincere relationship with him, while pointing to a hopeful future of renewal and restoration.